Hello everyone, it's Robin and welcome back to my channel. I have been wanting to try my hand at chicken scratch embroidery for a while now, and with Valentine's Day just around the corner, I thought it would be the perfect time to give it a whirl. If you're unfamiliar with chicken scratch embroidery, it is a variation of cross stitch, normally stitched on gingham fabric. You'll see it a lot on vintage aprons, and it is absolutely adorable. So today I'm going to be sharing with you how I've used a few basic chicken scratch stitches to decorate some gingham fabric hearts to use in my Valentine decor. So let's jump right in. To get started, I cut a piece of gingham fabric slightly larger than the embroidery hoop that I wanted to use, and then I installed the fabric inside the hoop. Next, I cut a piece of embroidery floss and threaded it onto a needle with the loop at the end. I'm going to be stitching a simple heart shape, so I'll be using each square of the gingham as a stitching area regardless of the color. To get started, I brought my needle up from the back side of the fabric through the left bottom corner of the square and then back down again through the top right hand corner of the square. Then on the back side, I ran the needle through the loop at the end of my thread and gently pulled it tight to attach the thread to the fabric. To finish the stitch, I brought my needle up from the bottom right hand corner of the square and then back down again on the top left hand corner of the square, and that is your basic chicken scratch stitch, which I will use to create my heart shaped design. Once you have your first stitch done, you just continue the process of making individual stitches, coming up from the bottom, going down in the top corner, coming back up from the bottom corner, and going back down on the top left corner, if that makes sense. If you ever cross stitched before, this will come very easily for you because this is your basic cross stitch stitch as well. From here, I continued on adding a stitch to each square to form my design. I wish I had a pattern to share with you, but I just sort of made it up as I went by counting the squares. Once I have my design completely stitched, I will give you a close-up view so you could copy the design from there if you would like to make your own just like this. At some point, you're going to either come to the end of your design or to the end of your thread. When this happens on the back side of your fabric, thread your needle through a few stitches, tie a small knot, and then clip off any excess thread. And this is how my little heart turned out. I think it is so adorable. So for this next design that I want to stitch, I'm only going to be using the dark red squares. So I've gone ahead and added a stitch on each of the dark red squares, working from the top of my fabric down to the bottom. And as you can see, I've done a little bit here ahead of time just to show you how the pattern starts to look after a while. This is a very traditional chicken scratch design, and I think it is so cool. I am using the stitch to make a background design for the shape of a heart that I'm going to be cutting out of the fabric. So I just kept on adding rows of stitching until I had enough to fill in the whole area of the template that I made for the size I wanted my finished project to be, which is about a 3-inch heart. When I was done with that, I can move on to another design. This third design is very easy, and once again, I'm only using the dark red squares. My pattern is stitching 2 rows of stitches, skipping 2 rows of red squares, and then stitching 2 rows of stitches again. As you can see, I'm getting towards the end of my design, but once again, I'm going to make sure that I stitch in enough stitches to cover a surface area to make a background for another heart shape that I'll be cutting out of the fabric. So just like before, I will lay my template over the top of it to make sure that it is large enough before I end my stitching. So now that I have a few designs to work with, I get to move on to the fun part of making some tiny little cushions with my creations. I laid my template on top of my design, centering it as best I could. As you can feel around and kind of feel the design. With the heart, it's the most important to get it centered. Once the template was placed where I wanted it to be, I used a pencil to trace along the outside edge, and this is going to be my stitching line. Here's a good look at what my pencil lines look like when I was finished copying the design. I then went ahead and layered my fabric on top of another piece of fabric, and I pinned it in place. The next step is to sew the two layers together, but we need to make sure to leave a 1-inch opening along one side to add the stuffing later on. So then I just used my sewing machine to sew the two pieces together. And this is what it should look like with the little opening on the side to add the stuffing. So next we're going to go ahead and find that little opening that we made, and we're going to start putting in some fiber fill. Now for this project, I'm actually reusing a pillow that I bought at the thrift store. I just cut it open and pulled out some of the fiber fill, and this is a very inexpensive way to get some fiber fill if you don't want to have to go to the store and purchase a whole big package of it. So I just kept adding stuffing until my little heart was nice and plump feeling, and then I just kind of squished it around a little bit to kind of make sure that it's filling in all the design nice and neatly, and then I was ready to sew up this open edge. Now you could go ahead and hand sew this section closed, but I am going to go ahead and use my sewing machine because I find that it is much quicker and much easier to use that instead of hand sewing it shut. So I'm just going to add one little pin along the edge there just to keep the layers together nicely, and then I'm going to take it back over to my sewing machine and line up my needle with the previous sewing line. And then I just went ahead and added a quick little seam along my stitching line, which I had previously drawn when I traced the template, and that closes up my little gap on the side of my heart. And this is what it looks like when I am done. I think it turned out pretty good. So the final step in today's project is to deal with all this excess fabric. And to do that, I'm going to be using my pinking shears. So I'll just run it along the outside edge of my heart about 1/4 of an inch away from my stitching line all the way around. And with the cutting done, my little heart is finished. I think it turned out so cute. You could use both sides, actually. Both sides are adorable, if you ask me. I've used my cute little hearts to fill up a bowl on the side table in my living room. I added a few vintage Valentine cards as well, and I think it makes a nice little quick and easy display for Valentine's Day. I sure hope you enjoyed today's video because I had a lot of fun with this project. I would love to know what you think down in the comments, and I hope to see you again very soon in my next video. Bye now.